Not everything that happens inside a church follows the atmosphere of respect and solemnity that many people expect. In some cases, unexpected attitudes, exaggerated behavior, and even police cases end up drawing more attention than the very message of salvation, and that is exactly what you are going to see here today. So leave your like, click the subscribe button, and let's go! What was supposed to be just another service ended up turning into complete chaos in the city of Palmares, Brazil. Everything started when, in the middle of the religious meeting, some members began accusing the pastor himself of adultery. The accusation hit the temple like a bomb and caught everyone by surprise. According to reports, the pastor, who was married, had allegedly been involved with one of the women who attended the church. The situation got out of control when a woman stood up and stated out loud that she had proof of the relationship. From that point on, the atmosphere became tense. Shouts began echoing through the place. Believers tried to understand what was happening, and the religious leader started defending himself, saying that everything was nothing more than a setup against him. The argument between the two became the center of the service. On one side, direct accusations. On the other, denials and attempts to discredit the accuser. Some people tried to calm things down, but it did not work. The exchange of words became increasingly intense, with accusations being made in front of the entire congregation. With the commotion taking over the environment, it became impossible to continue the ceremony. The service had to be interrupted and ended without a final prayer, without a message, and with many people leaving the place visibly shocked. For many believers, that moment marked a break of trust that was hard to ignore. In Palmares, Brazil, that service will certainly not be forgotten anytime soon. You have probably heard of Apostle Valdemiro Santiago, leader of the World Church of the Power of God. His name became famous in Brazil, not so much for sermons or social actions, but for controversies involving fundraising campaigns, constant requests for money, and a financial empire that grew alongside the church. Valdemiro Santiago de Oliveira was born in Palma in the interior of Minas Gerais, Brazil. He had a difficult childhood, lost his mother at 12 years old, and worked in the fields from an early age. He studied only up to the 5th grade of elementary school. At 16 years old, he joined the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, where he started as a regular member, became a worker, then a pastor, and was eventually consecrated as a bishop. He became one of the strong names in the church and a trusted man of Edir Macedo. In 1996, during a mission in Mozambique, Valdemiro claims to have survived an accident at sea that lasted for hours. He always said that it was a divine deliverance and the turning point of his life. 2 years later, he broke away from the Universal Church and founded the World Church of the Power of God, taking pastors and believers with him.
Porque o homem não é nada, né? O que o homem faz só dá certo se Deus confirmar.
The major turning point came in 2008 when he began occupying almost all of the programming of Rede 21 linked to band. The exposure was massive. The church grew quickly, reached thousands of temples, and inaugurated gigantic structures such as the complex in Guarulhos, Brazil, known as the World City of the Dreams of God. But along with growth came crises, debts, internal strikes, controversial campaigns, and investigations began to pile up. In recent years, properties were seized, temples put up for auction, and employees complained about delayed salaries. Even high-value assets entered legal disputes. Today, the future of the empire built by Valdemiro Santiago is uncertain. It remains to be seen whether the church will be able to sustain itself, or if this sequence of problems marks the beginning of an end that few had imagined. Jesse Duplantis is one of the most well-known televangelists in the United States, but his name usually appears less for religious messages and more for controversies linked to ostentation. A multimillionaire, he has never hidden his luxurious lifestyle. On several occasions, he said that he had owned 3 private jets and that all of them were used, according to him, to spread the word of God. The controversy gained strength when Jesse publicly stated that God had spoken to him, saying it was time to change airplanes. The desired model was a Falcon 7X, valued at around $54 million. The justification was simple. With a more modern jet, he would be able to preach to more people around the world. For that, he asked for direct financial financial help from believers. In addition to the airplane, Jesse also draws attention for the house where he lives. He claims to live in the largest residence in the state of Louisiana, a mansion of approximately 40,000 square feet purchased outright. According to him, the furniture in the house is worth more than many entire properties. All of this is presented as proof of spiritual prosperity. But one of the most awkward moments happened during a religious broadcast. On the same day, Jesse was talking about wealth and faith. While he read a biblical passage to justify his prosperity, his own wife, Kathy, read aloud the expanded version of the text. Unintentionally, she highlighted that the verse referred to a wicked man who becomes rich. Jesse's reaction was immediate and visibly uncomfortable.
Well, it's Amplified says it, be not afraid when an ungodly one is made rich.
That's true.
When the wealth and glory of his house are increased, and goes on, for when he dies, he will carry nothing away.
Yeah,
his
I understand.
glory will not descend after
See,
him.
God don't care if someone's ungodly to be rich.
Beyond wealth, Jesse also draws attention for stories in which he claims to hear God audibly, describing physical encounters and direct dialogues during the early morning hours. For critics, this discourse serves to reinforce donation requests and sustain the so-called prosperity gospel. It is that typical charlatan that everyone recognizes from afar. During a service called Digging for Gold, a pastor decided to completely go off script and caused a real panic inside the church. In the middle of the celebration, he simply stepped away from the pulpit and started running toward the exit as if something very serious was happening. In just a few seconds, the atmosphere changed and confusion took over the place. Without understanding anything, part of the congregation panicked. Some people got up in a hurry and ran after the pastor, thinking there was some kind of emergency. Others froze, trying to figure out whether it was real or just another strange moment of the service. The result was a hall divided between those who ran out desperately and those who decided to stay. After the situation calmed down, the pastor returned and explained that none of it was a real danger. According to him, it was all part of a practical demonstration. The idea was to test how people reacted to fear and use that as a spiritual lesson. He cited Psalm 91, which talks about not fearing the terror of the night nor invisible dangers, and said that fear arises when there is a lack of understanding. To reinforce the point, he highlighted a believer named Angelina. While almost everyone ran, she remained seated in the same place. The reason was simple. She already knew that the scene was staged and that there was no threat at all. For the pastor, this proved that knowledge of the truth drives away fear. It really was something quite creative. When Benny Hinn arrives in a city, the space never seems enough. Gyms fill up, wheelchairs appear everywhere, and the atmosphere is always the same. Total expectation for a healing. For years, the televangelist has built his fame by promising miracles live, in front of cameras, with stories that quickly go viral. At one of these events, a scene drew attention. A woman was presented as someone who had allegedly had polio and would never walk again. According to the account shown on the program, she simply stood up from the wheelchair and walked in front of the crowd. The audience reacted as if witnessing something extraordinary. Shouts, applause, and the word miracle spreading through the place.
She and her friends say she just climbed out of her wheelchair and walked.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. It's unbelievable.
The problem is that this story was not what it seemed. Later, it came to light that the woman never had polio. She worked for a television crew that decided to place her there on purpose. The idea was simple: to test whether Benny Hinn verified the stories that appeared in his services, or if any emotional account was already enough to become proof of divine healing. Nothing was checked. The story was accepted, aired, and used as yet another example of supernatural power. For critics, this raises a delicate question. If someone can go on stage, tell any story, and leave as healed, where does the responsibility of the one conducting the spectacle come in? Benny Hinn himself has admitted at different times that he is human, that he makes mistakes, and that he has committed serious errors. He also said that he wants to do better. Even so, stories like this continue to spark debate. Is it faith or acting? Miracle or convenient negligence? In the end, viewers are left trying to understand where belief ends and business begins. Federal investigators in the United States revealed a case that mixes faith, exploitation, and extreme luxury. David Taylor and Michelle Brannon, two self-proclaimed religious leaders linked to the Kingdom of God Global Church, were arrested, accused of using religious beliefs to profit at the expense of vulnerable followers. According to authorities, the scheme had been operating since at least 2013 and moved more than $50 million in donations. According to the case files, Taylor presented himself as an apostle and claimed to have a direct relationship with Jesus, whom he called his best friend. Michelle Brannon acted as his main ally. Together they attracted people by promising to satisfy so-called spiritual hunger. In practice, these people were led to work in telemarketing centers spread across states such as Michigan, Missouri, Texas, Florida, and North Carolina.
Paid over $6,000 to Louis Vuitton.
Yes.
What would that be for?
The work was unpaid. Victims had strict call and fundraising targets. Those who did not meet the required numbers suffered punishments that included psychological abuse, deprivation, and even physical aggression, according to investigators. Messages attached to the case show orders to isolate members and remove food as a form of punishment. Meanwhile, the money raised funded a luxurious lifestyle. Prosecutors state that the couple purchased cars such as Mercedes, Bentley, and Rolls-Royce, as well as a boat, four-wheelers, jet skis, and even expenses of $10,000 on seafood alone. A mansion in Avila, Florida, valued at more than $9 million, was also acquired. The arrest took place after FBI operations in 2 states. Taylor was detained in North Carolina and Brannon in Tampa. In a video of more than 6 minutes, Pastor Creflo Dollar, leader of a large church in Atlanta, asked 200,000 people to donate at least $300 each. The math is simple. The goal was to raise around $60 million to purchase a new private jet. Creflo was already known for traveling the world in private aircraft. He himself appears in videos landing in places such as Nairobi, Kenya. The problem, according to the pastor, is that the current airplane, manufactured in 1984, was becoming dangerous. He cited engine failures on a flight to Australia and a more recent episode in London when the aircraft ran off the runway during takeoff with his wife and daughters on board. That is when the idea of the so-called Jesus jet merged. For Creflo, it was no longer possible to take risks. An airplane is not like a car that you pull over when it breaks down. It was time, according to him, to believe that God would provide a new one. The reaction was not the best. Former members appeared to protest and ended up being expelled from church property. At the same time, longtime members defended the pastor, saying that contributing was part of the mission. Criticism increased when organizations that evaluate religious ministries pointed out a lack of financial transparency. According to these groups, there is no public accountability for how millions in donations are used. Aviation experts explained that the desired model, a Gulfstream 650, is among the most expensive and sought-after jets in the world. The wait for a new one can reach 4 years. In the end, the case left a question in the air. How far does faith go, and at what point does luxury start to speak louder? During a sermon that seemed to be proceeding normally, an unexpected comment ended up stealing the scene and generating visible embarrassment. In the middle of a speech about faith and public confession, the pastor interrupts his reasoning and points to someone at the back of the place. He blurts out the phrase, "that small man back there," without much context, which immediately changes the atmosphere. Soon after, he realizes that the expression sounded strange. Before anyone reacts, the pastor himself starts to explain. He says he did not want to offend anyone and that he was not talking about a dwarf. The attempt to correct himself comes quickly, but ends up making the situation even more confusing. Instead of simply moving on, he goes deeper into the justification. The pastor then clarifies that in fact, he was referring to a child who was at the back of the church. He emphasizes several times that he would never call a dwarf a small man because that would be offensive. The problem is that no one had raised that possibility until then. He himself brought the topic up, creating discomfort that did not exist.
You know, and we've just given you an opportunity to confess him before men. He sees you, a little guy in the back. Little guy, I'm not a midget, he's a child. I mean, I don't want anyone to think I was offending a midget.
The explanation goes on longer than necessary. The more he talks, the clearer it becomes that he realized too late that the initial phrase was poorly chosen. The audience remains silent, trying to decide whether to laugh, ignore it, or simply wait for the moment to pass. The service was going normally, with the pastor at the pulpit and the audience listening in silence, until one detail changed everything. In the middle of the sermon, he notices a man talking among the benches. It is not a discreet whisper, it is noticeable. The pastor stops, looks directly at the audience, and shouts asking for attention. The message is clear. That was not a place for side conversations. After the scolding, he tries to resume the message. He continues talking about faith. For a few seconds, it seems that everything was left behind, but it was not. Suddenly, the pastor interrupts himself and turns again toward the same man. With a tone full of irony, he drops a line that catches everyone by surprise. He says that if that man ever decides to become a preacher, he hopes that people in the audience do exactly the same thing and keep talking while he speaks.
Hey, sir, quit your talking over here. Hey! Quit your talking. I'm talking to you, sir.
In the end, this is one of those embarrassments that everyone has feared experiencing at some point in church. The name Edilea Fernandez began circulating strongly on social media because of her intense and direct way of preaching. Today, she is seen as an internet phenomenon, but the path to this prominence was anything but easy. Before fame, Edilea's life was marked by frustrations, financial difficulties, and a lot of personal struggle. Everything changed after her first engagement. She was engaged to the son of Pastor Raposo Lemos, known as Raposinho. At first, the relationship seemed promising, especially for someone who saw marriage as a chance to change her life. However, the engagement ended unexpectedly when Edilea discovered that her fiancé had no interest in women and maintained the relationship only as a facade. With that, the dream of escaping poverty through that marriage came to an end. Reality at home was harsh. Edilea is the middle sister among 25 children and reports that the family faced many hardships. There was a lack of food, lack of money, and even proper clothes to go to church were rare. Even so, she did not give up. She began preaching in small churches, using what little she had and facing constant judgment and difficulties. Over time, her intense way of speaking drew attention. Invitations began to appear, travels across Brazil increased, and the offerings collected opened new doors. That is how Edilea managed to found her own church, located in the city of Monte Grande, Brazil. Today, the church gathers around 300 believers, mostly men who seek guidance and blessings from the pastor, but many criticize her, saying that her clothes are provocative, and that is why so many men attend the place. Even so, Edilea continues preaching with energy, strong phrases, and great fervor. Despite the negative comments, for many, she has become a symbol of overcoming, faith, and resilience in the face of adversity. During a service that seemed to be proceeding normally, a pastor ended up living one of those moments that no one wants to experience, live in front of the entire church. Right at the beginning of the message, he decided to open his heart and said he was facing what he called his worst nightmare at that moment. And it was not a scandal or an accusation. It was technology failing at the worst possible moment.
As I was sitting here while she was singing the lovely solo, I was swapping from my Sunday school notes back to my sermon that I've already preached, and my iPad crashed. There goes the sermon.
Since seminary days, he explained that he had always prepared his sermons digitally. All his notes were organized on an iPad, which, according to him, had never given him problems before. His confidence was so great that the device became an essential part of the service. But while a singer performed a special solo, the pastor took advantage of the moment to switch the notes from Sunday school to the main sermon. That is when everything went wrong. The iPad simply froze, restarted, and took along the entire sermon that had already been prepared and preached on other occasions. At that moment, there was no accessible backup and no time to calmly improvise. The curious detail is that the hymn sung minutes earlier talked about trusting only in Jesus, which made the situation even more ironic. In front of the congregation, the pastor laughed at himself and commented that between Jesus and the phone's iCloud, he believed he would be able to move forward. Without avoiding the embarrassment, he turned the problem into a frank conversation with the church, showing vulnerability and good humor. In the end, the service continued without a ready script, without slides, and without digital notes, just with improvisation, memory, and faith. Do not forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this.